Hello, my name is Brian Friedland, and welcome to another episode of Inside the GSC. In conjunction with Spring Officials Appreciation Week, I'm interviewing Gerald Pettway, a men's basketball and women's lacrosse official here at the Gulf South Conference. Gerald has been an official for over 15 years and also works with both the Collegiate Women's Lacrosse Officiating Association and the Southeastern Lacrosse Officials Association. He will talk about the importance of appreciating officials, his path to becoming an official, and more. All right, so on another edition of Inside the GSC, today I am happy to be joined by one of our officials here at the Gulf South Conference for both men's basketball and women's lacrosse, Gerald Pettway. Gerald, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem, no problem. So we'll start diving into this one a little bit. So before we get started, just want to see, how's your spring season been going so far? I know it's been a busy season for you.
Yeah, very busy. Women's lacrosse is kind of like, unlike maybe basketball, we don't have as many officials, so you work a lot more games. So it's been busy, but enjoyable. The weather's been good. Outside of the pollen, I think it's been a pretty good season thus far. So I think once you get to this point in the season, pretty much every lacrosse official will tell you they're starting to feel it in their bodies, but it's been a good season, so can't complain.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what has your journey been like getting into officiating? Because as I touched on the intro, you do men's basketball and women's lacrosse. Those are two wildly different sports. So what was the journey getting into officiating in the first place and getting into those sports?
Yeah, so quick, I guess, so about 24 years ago, I live in Birmingham, and I was playing a lot of rec league, church league basketball, and a gentleman that officiated a lot of those games, I used to give him a very hard time, just about how terrible he was, and they were killing me on the court, and he wasn't calling any fouls. And he told me, you really think this thing is easy, don't you? And I was like, well, I'm not saying it's easy, but you're just killing it. And so through some conversations, he got me into high school basketball, and he and I have become really, really good friends since that point. And so I started the journey in high school basketball, moved from high school basketball to doing high school football as well, and then moved into college basketball. And then about a year after I started doing college basketball, there was a request in the Birmingham area. I think they sent it throughout the state, said they were looking for lacrosse officials. And so they had an address, said, hey, contact this guy. And we talked to him, and he said, hey, come meet us at this address. And my buddy Willie and I were the only two people that showed up. And this gentleman kind of showed us in about a 4 or 5 hour window at his house some details of boys lacrosse. And we said, we came from basketball where you in high school, you do boys and girls, men and women. And so we said, well, hey, what about the girls game? And he goes, oh, I know nothing about that game. Here's a book. And so my first 2 years, I did both boys and girls lacrosse. And then after that second year, it was so much time, and there was a greater need on the girls' side, kind of, navigated more to that, and then moved from there into women's lacrosse. And, since then, it's been this journey of high school football, high school and college basketball, and women's college lacrosse. And so that's what it's been for the last 16 years now.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It definitely keeps you busy, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Keeps you busy, keeps you in shape, but you start to feel it by the time the season is over. So from August until about May, I'm pretty busy, and then I take, June, July to try to recover.
For sure. And even within, I'm no lacrosse connoisseur, but I know that men's lacrosse and women's lacrosse both have a different rule set, right?
Very different games, completely different. And so to see the kind of where women's lacrosse has grown to, at least especially over the last 10 years, the rule changes to make the game more fluid, the rule changes to make the game faster and safer. It's been pretty incredible to see. But yeah, they are, if you had to define the game, you would say that men's lacrosse is a contact sport, women's lacrosse is a finesse sport. There's contact, probably sometimes more than we want, but the general concept of the game is it's really a finesse sport, and that's why they only have goggles and a mouthpiece, and they don't have shoulder pads and helmets because they're not supposed to make that kind of contact with each other.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I did not know that.
Yeah.
But and then so even just first couple questions we've already touched on. You have a very unique skill set for being an official. And so I was wondering, what are some of the bigger nuances between basketball and lacrosse you've kind of noticed? I'm sure you could write a book on the differences between the two of them, but what are some of the bigger ones that you've noticed?
Well, and I'll kind of throw football in a little bit.
Okay.
Football is kind of a little bit of a slower sport in the sense that from an officiating standpoint, you have so much more time to make a decision. You see something, you can think about it. I think he's holding. Oh, I think that was pass interference. I can throw my flag. Ironically, we can maybe get together and say, yeah, maybe it wasn't a foul. We can wave the flag off. Uh, Basketball and lacrosse require you to be really decisive. Things happen and you have to make a decision pretty quickly or you've missed it. Basketball, he traveled. If I didn't call it, boom, I missed it. He's gone, the play's over, and so you have to kind of be a little bit more decisive. And so those two sports are very similar in that approach, that it requires kind of quick decision making. And then the structure of officials on the field and on the court are the same. So in basketball, we have a lead official, we have a center official, we have a trail official. It's the exact same thing in lacrosse. We have a lead official, a center official, a trail official. The only differences are in basketball, we will rotate in live time. We will rotate as the play dictates. In lacrosse, we rotate every 2 goals. So you will be in a position until 2 goals are scored, and then you move to a different position. So it gives you, if you do one, it's kind of almost a natural feeder. This is my recruiting pitch to basketball officials to come to lacrosse. It's a natural feeder to the lacrosse game, so you start to understand coverage areas and things like that. So, I've tried my best to recruit basketball officials, but the one thing they immediately say is, it's an outdoor sport with a lot of running. I'm like, yeah, it's not 94 feet. It's a lot of yards out there to cover, and it is outdoors, so you have to deal with the elements.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And then, so I know at the professional level, a lot of officials, they do this full time. At Division Two, it's a little bit harder to do that. You don't see as many Scott Fosters or Tony Brothers out there. But so are there any skills from your day-to-day life or full-time work that have kind of helped you to continue growing as an official, even if you're not doing it as a full-time career?
Yeah, I think so. So I'm in an executive position at my company, and so that requires you to deal with a lot of personalities, and you have to kind of deal with a lot of different perspectives. You've got to be very mindful of what you say and how you say it, because that carries a lot of weight and a lot of impact. Officiating is the exact same thing. You have a lot of players, you have a lot of coaches, and so the two kind of really feed into each other. In some ways, I think being an official has helped my professional career because you understand conflict resolution, you understand how to hear people out, you understand how to address just the issue and not the emotion of the situation. So they kind of go hand in hand, and I think when you get into officiating, one of the first things that you have to understand is, people are talking to the shirt. They're not really talking to you because they don't really know you. They have a vested interest in the outcome. And as an official, you're an unbiased, objective individual there to manage the game, keep it safe, and be sure that it's played according to the rules. So then you start to translate some of those things into leadership and management in your life and in your career. And it's kind of the same things, What am I managing? What is my role? How am I supposed to conduct myself? And it gives you maybe a patience that other people don't always have. So it's good and bad. And I talk to a lot of people that say, I don't know how you do that. I couldn't do that. But you really can. You just have to not make it personal. And that can be difficult at times, but most officials do a really good job of not allowing it to become personal.
Right. And that's a bring thing you brought up too, where it's kind of like where it's people are talking to the shirt because at the end of the day, like all officials are humans. There are going to be mistakes.
Yeah,
It's not like the robot umpires they're trying to put in baseball. Like it's an imperfect science, I would say.
absolutely. It is. And, you know, what happens a lot, and this is what just the general public doesn't understand, particularly at the college level and above, but even at the high school level, is the amount of time and effort that officials put into trying to do a good job. The amount of studying, reviewing film, getting game tape, looking at mistakes. A lot of that happens that people just don't really understand. And so hopefully people start to understand that, when officials make mistakes, most of them take that very badly. We don't want to make mistakes. We want to get the game. We want to get the calls right. We don't want to make a decision that appears to negatively impact the game, much like no one wants to go do a bad job anywhere. And so occasionally you have coaches and fans that understand that, but sometimes people are just like, oh, well, they're cheating. It's like, oh, they're not really cheating. Maybe they made a mistake, but they're not trying to make that mistake. So, that's kind of the aspect of it. But it's just the way that we are. People want their team to win, and we understand that.
Right, for sure, for sure. And then you started touching on it too, but I was wondering, what are some ways that you improve? I think you were touching on watching game film and that kind of stuff. So is it very similar to how coaches are improving their team? They're
Yeah,
watching
yeah.
film and you're watching all the calls and saying, "Oh, I missed a charge call here," or "Oh, this person made a really good call here that I didn't notice." Like, is it that kind of stuff?
Well, it's that and above. So you have a lot of feedback from assigners. If a coach has a situation in a game that they are concerned about, generally speaking, that coach will reach out to the assigner, and the assigner will kind of look at the game film, and then that coach will send. I mean, the assigner will send the crew maybe some questions. It says, hey, got these questions from the coach. Take a look at this. Give me your thoughts. And they'll get feedback from all members of the crew. And then the assigner may say, well, hey, I agree with you all. We got this right according to the rule. Or you were out of position here. If you take a step down or a step up, you'll have a better view. You'll get this play right. And then you try to follow up with the coach. So you have those types of aspects. But then you have individuals, in women's lacrosse, we have a mentor program where we have kind of families of individuals from across the country. So you may have 5 officials from across the country at varying levels where we will get on conference calls and we just talk about situations. We review plays. We talk about how you handle those situations. There's a lot that goes into it. Every sport does a lot of, hey, what they call you make the call type plays. So it could be a play from anywhere in the country, and it's being sent to all the officials to say, tell us what you think about this, because you want that consistency. And I think the biggest thing that we're trying to get when we're reviewing film, looking at rules, talking about plays is consistency. We have to be consistent. It's the one thing that coaches and players will tell you. They cannot adjust to inconsistent officiating, not in a game, not game to game, and really not season to season. Like, just be consistent, and then they can adjust. They will adjust to how you're calling the game. But if I'm doing it one way and you're doing it one way, and another person on the field is doing it one way, then they're like, what's going on out there? So, but yeah, a lot of film study, a lot of rules review, and then I just think kind of that interaction with other officials, because other officials know what you're supposed to be looking at, where you're supposed to be standing. They will generally give you the best feedback of, You got it right, you got it wrong. And so when you have people that you can trust to do that, is where you really see officials start to grow in their craft.
And then, so it's also my understanding that you do some work outside of or within women's lacrosse officiating, whether it be with the Collegiate Women's Lacrosse Officiating Association or the Southeastern Lacrosse Officials Association. I was wondering if you could touch on your involvement in that and kind of what your role has been and why you wanted to get involved with those in the first place.
Well, so I was doing a signing for the Gulf South Conference up until last year, and then we kind of moved that more centrally located. But I am an observer for women's lacrosse, so I will go out and observe other officials. I also teach clinics. So when you have officials who are trying to move up in the ranks of lacrosse, we have a process of conducting clinics and evaluating those officials and moving them up to the next level. And it's really just about growing the sport. So I love officiating. I love football. I love basketball. I love lacrosse. I love being in what I call the best seat in the house. When you're on the field, that's the best seat in the house. And so I love the sports that I do. I really enjoy them. I do them for the love of the game. And so lacrosse, unlike football and basketball, is just struggling a lot more. I think every sport is struggling to recruit officials, bring people on. You talk about we're at a Division II level, so the compensation is not that of a Division I, where people can say, well, hey, you have to put up with a lot, but the compensation makes it nice. Division II, Division III, NAIA, those, the compensation is not that great. So when you're doing it for the love. You're doing it to give those kids, those men and women, an opportunity. And so it's just kind of a way to give back and help grow the sport and be sure that as young kids come up and want to play, well, you have to have officials. You can't play any sport without officials. And so it's just a way to kind of give back, stay connected, keep me sharp. Young people will challenge you and say, hey, why do we do it that way? Or what do we need to do in that situation? So it just kind of helps me grow as an official myself.
Right. And especially too, I feel like lacrosse definitely isn't as big of a sport down here. So growing it in this region is definitely something that's big. Like I know I'm from Connecticut and it's like I hear more about lacrosse way more up there than I do down here. So that's awesome.
Yeah, so in the Gulf South, you probably would be surprised at the amount of lacrosse we actually do have.
Okay.
It is definitely not as big as football down here or basketball, but there is a lot of lacrosse in this area, and it's not on the level of the Northeast. That's kind of that corridor is flush with lacrosse from probably Connecticut down to Virginia. You probably have more, lacrosse players per capita there than anywhere else. But the state of Georgia has a very large high school lacrosse program. Tennessee has a pretty large one. Alabama's not as big, but kind of growing. So you have these pockets, but you don't have the officials that are growing with the sport. And that's kind of the scary thing for the sport is you got all these young kids coming up who are going to want to play high school, going to want to go to college and play. You have more and more college programs trying to start, but we're not adding more officials. And it's like at some point you get to a breaking point where it says, all right, something has to give. And so hopefully, people will see this, say, hey, if you played lacrosse or you were athletic at all and you enjoy lacrosse or basketball or any of those sports, start thinking about officiating. It's a wonderful thing. You really love it once you get into it.
Right. And even you were touching on before where it's like busy season for you because there's just not that many women's lacrosse officials out there. So segueing into my next question, I was wondering, you have a lot going on, whether it's officiating, your full-time work. How do you maintain a good work-life balance?
Let's just say I don't always. So my kids now are older, but my wife would always say, "Man, you're gone so much." Lacrosse officiating is kind of my therapy. I think everybody kind of needs their thing, and that's kind of my escape from work and family and all those things that you can't get rid of. That's kind of, I go to the gym, I work out, and then I'm officiating. When I'm officiating, I'm having fun. I'm enjoying myself. That's kind of my time to step back, and that's why it would probably never be like a full-time job for me. I wouldn't want this to have to feed my family. Like, no, what I want to do is really be able to come out, do a good job, enjoy it, and have fun. And I think what you may be seeing from a lot of officials is they stop having fun, and that's why they're stepping away from it. But yeah, to be honest, I haven't always done the best job in balancing that. So I'm trying to do better. It's a little easier now. Kids are grown and gone, so it makes it a lot easier.
But at least you're not, but that's the big thing. You're not looking at it as work. It's just something that's fun for you. And that, I
Yeah,
think that's why a lot of people end up losing love for it because they're like, oh, this is my job. And it's like when you
yeah,
start looking at it in those like negative connotations, you're kind of like, you're lost at that point.
yeah. You're lost. Yeah, and so yeah, it's just a viewpoint that I carry, and it helps keep it in perspective for me for sure. And sometimes, even officials, they will lose perspective, they lose focus, they start to look at it the wrong way or differently. I won't say the wrong way, and it can consume you. My job is my job, and it's the thing that I've got to go do. I do this because I enjoy it. I could wake up tomorrow and say I don't want to officiate anymore, and it's not going to change my life. Other than I'll probably get out of shape really quick.
For sure, for sure. And then, so since we're doing this in conjunction with Spring Officials Appreciation Week, I wanted to see what your thoughts on this were, but how important is it that we celebrate officials during a week like this?
I think it's critically important. I think across the country, in every sport, officials will tell you they don't feel appreciated. And we do these very large surveys every year because they want to find out about why officials are leaving the sport. And the number one reason every year, and probably every year for the last 10 years, is fan, coach, and player behavior. It's just like people get so invested in who wins or what the outcome is they forget that one, officials are human beings. They're not perfect. They're going to make mistakes. And two, this is really just a game. It's important. And the higher up you go, the more important it becomes. But, it's not worth fighting over. It's not worth accosting officials as they walk to their vehicles. It's not worth the negative comments. Fans are supposed to yell and cheer for their team and ref you suck. That comes with the territory. But when it starts to borderline on sexist and racist and just really negative comments, what we are seeing as officials, especially those of us who's been in it for a while, is this younger generation of individuals, kids, they just aren't built to accept that. And they just are like, well, I'm not going to accept that. And so what we're seeing is fewer people coming into sports. And therefore, you're going to create this epidemic as people like myself start to age out. It's like, well, you're going to have this huge gap. So I think it's just critically important for everybody to kind of sit back and say, you know what, maybe you did miss that call, but how many did you get right? And we appreciate the fact that you're here. And I will say this, in lacrosse, probably more than any other sport, you get that. You will have fans who will be yelling, but then after the game, if you happen to have to pass by them, they will say, "Well, good game, ref. Good job." My buddy and I talk about lacrosse, women's lacrosse. It's the only sport that we know of where the players thank the officials after the game. It always happens every game. They always thank the officials. So there's a kind of a level of sportsmanship there that's really appreciated. But if people just could kind of focus on, we all love sports. I think everybody that would be watching this, everyone that attends sporting events, we love sports. But you can't have sports without officials. You're just not. You can't have it. And so appreciate it. Less you lose it, and then you have something very different out of it.
Right. And because social media and pretty much focuses like so much for engagement on like one play too, you get like people that are like that think they're experts. Like the perfect example was when the Saints were playing the Rams in the NFC Championship a while back, and everybody's like, "Oh, they missed the pass interference call," but it's like nobody talks about how Sean Payton could have just ran out the clock too and just kicked a field goal. So it's like everybody hyper focuses on one part and they don't see the bigger picture. And they just
Yeah.
want looking for somebody to blame, and that's not how it should work, obviously.
Well, not only that, but especially as you start to talk about things like college basketball or high school football and things like that, people watch certain sports and they will attribute the rules of that sport to your game, and these rules are very different. And so, again, 99% of officials know the rules better than you. We have to take a test every year at the beginning of the season with rules questions in it. So, it's, again, good officials, we don't really get caught up when people are yelling. It's like, you're yelling, but you're wrong. And the funny thing is, like, if you're going to yell, at least be right. Like, don't be yelling when you don't know the rules. But, so yeah, it's just, human nature sometimes. Again, we get so invested in sport. We want to win. Everybody wants to win, that we just kind of lose focus sometimes, that your officials are really there. We don't care who wins the game. We really don't care who wins the game. What we want to do is do the best job we can, try to make sure that game is fair. And if we make a mistake, we're definitely, we take it to heart. It's very serious.
And so I was also wondering too, if somebody wanted to get into officiating, what would you recommend doing?
Some of the easiest ways to get into officiating is find like your local high school association. Generally speaking, you can't start at the college level. Now there are some women's lacrosse programs that have kind of been designed for former players who kind of understand the game and kind of fast track them, because they're in shape, they've played lacrosse, they kind of understand the game, and so there is kind of a program that we have that will help them kind of get fast track. But generally speaking, you would want to find like a local high school association for whatever sport you're interested in, and that's kind of be your foray into getting started. Generally, you'll start at like maybe the middle school level, the park ball level. You kind of work your way up, because obviously the skill level tends to get better. So you can't start out at high school varsity. Like, well, you don't really know enough. You kind of maybe need to do some park balls, some middle school, and then work your way up. The sad part about that is the lower the level, the worse the fan behavior tends to be. So if you're doing Little League, that's typically where you have the worst fan behavior. And by the time you get up to college, fans typically kind of know how to act, or you have people to address them when they don't know how to act. So it's kind of like, well, you got this guy in middle school games, like, well, he doesn't know what he's doing. Like, we know he's learning. This is learning time here. So you can't learn on a varsity game. You can't learn on a Gulf South game. You have to know what you're doing when you get to that point. So it's kind of a chicken and egg type thing, what comes first. But that's kind of the best way for anyone involved who wants to get involved to just get going in the sport, and in any sport. And I think wherever you go, they'll be happy to have you, because there's just a shortage of officials in every sport everywhere.
Right. And as somebody who used to Little League games, I can attest to some of the fans there who were yelling at me in my first game when it was 95 degrees outside. So definitely some interesting fans at Little League games, that's for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But and then I was also wondering too, and I think you touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but has your perspective overall on officiating changed since you had that initial interaction where you're like, what was that call? And then the guy is like, it's not as easy as it looks. Like, so has your perspective done a complete 180 since then?
Completely. Yeah. So you look at the game very differently, and you do develop a greater appreciation for, one, what you're supposed to be looking at, and then two, how difficult it can be to get things right. The more athletic, the faster the play, your reaction time has to be faster. So your positioning has to be better. Your judgment has to be better. Your anticipation has to be better. There's just so many different things that you can, there are people who've been doing this a lot longer than I have who will tell you one of the worst things that you can ever do as an official is feel like you have arrived. Like you must always be working, training, planning to get better. What can I do better? Why didn't I do this? Why was I out of position? And so, yeah, from, you know, 2001 to now, I just look at it so differently and like, man, it's a greater appreciation for officials in all sports. And so when I watch, pretty much when I watch anything now, I never watch as a fan. I'm watching so many different things because you can't unsee it as an official now. But I kind of enjoy that. And so when you see officials doing a really, really good job, you want to congratulate them. You appreciate that because you know how difficult it was to get that play right and to see that. And so, greater appreciation for sure, for officials and what it takes to do this and do it well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And now, so we'll segue into the last couple questions, do some fun rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
So obviously you've gotten to be on the road quite a bit, whether it be lacrosse, basketball, and even football. And seen a lot of different venues as well. So do you have a personal favorite field or arena that you've gotten to officiate in?
I don't know. I will say, Vanderbilt has a really nice facility. They kind of treat you really well. I probably shouldn't be saying that because then I might have like Florida or some other places listening. I don't know. We're treated pretty well. Pretty good. There's some, even at the high school level here in Alabama, we put a lot into football, so we have some really nice football stadiums even at the high school level. So yeah, I kind of guess I hate to say it, but the SEC has a lot of money, so they can spend it kind of better than anybody else. So some of those facilities are really nice facilities there.
For
Yeah,
sure, for sure.
Florida's pretty nice too.
The swamp, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And then, so obviously, I just brought it up, you're on the road quite a bit. If somebody's coming to the Southeast for the first time, is there a restaurant or a tourist destination that you would recommend going to?
Oh wow. Maybe, I mean, I'm from Birmingham, so I tell people, people have such a perception of Alabama and Birmingham from history, but Birmingham has so many wonderful restaurants. I mean, there's just so many great places to eat. So I'm going to be a little biased and say if you're coming to the South, you've heard of Atlanta, you've heard of Nashville, but come to Birmingham and try it out. I think they would be surprised. We just had the women's basketball regional tournament down there last week. And I think a lot of people were just surprised at the hospitality and the venues and what the city has to offer. So I'm going to be a little selfish and say, of all the places that I get a chance to go, come check out Birmingham. It's pretty nice.
It is pretty nice, I do have to say. And then we'll wrap it up with this one. So obviously you have your hands full. We've touched on it many times. You have your hands full with work. You have your hands full with three different sports of officiating. But if you could officiate another sport, if you had the time for it and were like, yeah, I want to get into pickleball or something like that, is there another sport that you would pick and why would you pick that sport?
Is there a sport that I would pick? I don't know. If I had to probably choose another sport, it would probably honestly be volleyball, to be honest with you. And for two reasons. I have two daughters. Both of them play volleyball, one of them at the collegiate level. And it is a fascinatingly athletic sport. When it's played really well, it's really good. You see some really good play. Secondly, as an older official, you don't have to run. So not having to run up and down the field or a court and just kind of be able to hang out in one spot, I think that would be my sport. That may be my sport for the future too. So as I get a little older, I may kind of transition to like wrestling and volleyball and get away from some of these running sports a little bit. So I think if I had to pick, yeah, it'd be volleyball.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Gerald, thank you so much for coming on today. I feel enlightened to learn more about women's lacrosse. I'm definitely going to study up on some of the rule differences between that and the men's game because that sounds really interesting. And I appreciate you talking about different perspective and just appreciating officials for what they do. And, we appreciate you here at the conference and appreciate you coming on the pod and talking about all of officiating.
Hey, well, thank you for having me. I appreciate you guys recognizing officials, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again in the future.
I hope you all enjoyed our interview today. Remember to like, share, and subscribe wherever content can be found. Stay tuned for what we have in store next time on Inside the GSC.